words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. Help us all to hear your good news message this beautiful Sunday morning. Amen. Guess what we're going to talk about this morning? Emotions. Don't you love it? How many of you put yourself in a category of an emotional person? How many of you are already emotional wrecks? Hey, those hands were a little quick. You know, it's interesting, and when I selected this sermon title, it's an emotional year. It is going to be an emotional year for a lot of reasons. Let's see. Let me see if I can come up with any. It's leap year. You know why it's such an emotional thing for me? Christmas Eve is on Saturday night. So we're going to be holding candles up and singing Silent Night at Saturday night Christmas Eve service. And then get up in the morning and come back to church for a Christmas Day morning service. I will be an emotional wreck from Christmas morning. I just know it. Because it's so exciting and so much fun. Also, dare I say it, it's an emotional year because it's an election year. I can't wait for November to get here. I'm already sick of the advertisements. I don't care what side of the aisle you are on. It's going to be emotional this year, isn't it? And to top it all off, the Methodist Church is having their every 4-year convention. And they're going to be dealing with all sorts of emotional decisions. Decisions that could change our lives, sort of. And the Book of Discipline from 2012 is thrown out the window, and I get a new 2016 with new rules and new guidelines and new tenets. It's going to be the same me and the same God, just a different book of discipline. Every 4 years they do that. And for some reason, I just think it's going to be an emotional year. A very emotional year. Whether it's the economy and jobs, or we're threatened, or somebody, you know what I'm talking about. It's a chaotic time. And that means emotions run wild. You know, I don't always read serious academic material, most of the time. But occasionally when I'm on vacation or I want to get away from it, I just, read for pleasure. And these are all really emotional books. The Bride and the Beast. Story of Lorna and Dick. I better stand over here. Joy in the parish. Hope for the pastor and the people. See? That's kind of related to my job. Isn't joy an emotion? We can't live without emotion. Is there anybody here that never shows any emotion? Hello? You're either catatonic or not alive if you don't show emotion. Otherwise, you're going to be showing some emotion. Women who do too much. How did I get that look? Women do too much, don't they? They got to have kids, they got to run the house, they got to do everything. Stress and the superwoman. A cry of absence. For all the people that should be here that aren't here. I cry for them. I weep for them. And it also talks about families that are missing critical parts of the family. That's a little too serious for me. For the next few minutes, we're going to talk about 8 emotions. Is there a Bible in there somewhere? Yeah, grab me a Bible. This is the book I read most. This is a love story. It's a mystery. It's filled with emotion. And I'm going to give you 8 emotions that are in this Holy Bible. that maybe will help us through this emotional year of 2016. You know what the first emotion is? Crying. How many of you have already cried in 2016? Oh, me too. More than once. For a variety of reasons. We cry. Is there crying in the Bible? You betcha. Did Jesus cry? He sure did. What's a good example of Jesus crying? Well, I'll give you one in case you didn't come up with it right away. Jesus cried when Lazarus died because he looked at Mary and Martha. They were sobbing because their brother was gone. And what they say to Jesus? If only you'd been here a couple of days early, you could have fixed this, Jesus. They were a little bit angry with Jesus. But when he looked at them crying, what did Jesus do? He wept. He sobbed. He cried. Because don't forget, whenever he came to town, he stayed at Lazarus' house. You know, with Mary and Martha. Is Mary the religious one? Yeah. She was at his feet, kissing his feet, hair. Martha's the appetizer and cleaner of the apartment. How many Marthas do we have here? I'm just curious. Love to clean house and make appetizers. How many would be down kissing Jesus' feet? Good. We got a few Marys. That's an emotion. There's nothing wrong with crying. Jesus cried. The other example that struck me is Peter cried. You know how many times Peter the Pope cried? Once. When did he cry? I won't offer any money. I know some of you know. He cried when the cock crowed the last time. And he goes, "Ups, Jesus told me I would deny him 3 times. That cock crowed and he melted. He sobbed. Peter, the cornerstone of this church, the rock, cried like a little baby. Nothing wrong with that. The second emotion, and remember there's no crying in heaven. That's one emotion that isn't allowed up there. Second emotion that I want to talk briefly about this morning is laughter. Is there laughter in the Bible? Is there laughter in this church occasionally? Yes. Should there be laughter in this church? Yeah. He doesn't want you to be moping around sad all the time. The story that is my favorite and the most obvious is Genesis. What's going on? Abraham is reading the Sunday newspaper. He's probably got a glass of red wine there, okay? And he's just minding his own business, and God comes to him and says, "Abe, you're going to be a daddy." Abe says, "I'm 93. Abe, you're going to be a daddy." And what does he do? Ha, ha. And obviously Sarah wasn't in the room, because he goes to Sarah, who's, I don't know what she's doing. I wasn't there. I was there for Abraham, but I wasn't there for Sarah. Anyway, Sarah's there, and God says, "You're going to be a mother." She says, "You know, I'm in my 90s. He says, "Is anything impossible for God?" No. Don't I say it almost every Sunday? She's a mother of many. What does she do? Ha, ha. Isn't that a natural human emotion? And that's in the book of Genesis. We're supposed to laugh. Emotion number 3, my least favorite. So I won't talk long about it. Whining and complaining. Do we have any whiners and complainers in this church? Good. God doesn't like. Annabelle, don't do this to me, Annabelle. It's not good timing, Annabelle. God doesn't like whiners and complainers because we're big picture people. He loves you. You're going to whine about that? He saves you. He forgave you. He's going to lead you to perfection. You want to whine and complain about that? I don't think so. Do you deserve any of that? Nope. What are you whining about? My father, when I was 5 years old, made me sign a document that said I would never whine and complain about anything. I was 5, so I signed it. Because he said, no matter what you do, whining and complaining doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. It was a good lesson then. And is there whining and complaining in the Bible? Ho, ho, ho! You betcha! Where do I start? Why don't we start in the desert with the Israelites stumbling around? One day they were complaining about the food. This food is lousy. We're better off back in Egypt being killed, and at least we got food back there. Right? They were whiners and complainers. And what happened? He sent a manna from heaven. Nope. I was expecting a little veal, Parmesan, I don't like this manna. Folks, it's an insult to God when we whine and complain. Just look at it that way. All He gives us, and we are still not satisfied. We'll get to some other emotions in a minute. Emotion number 4. My favorite, because I just gave you my worst. Love. Aw, isn't that sweet? Is there anybody here who doesn't love somebody or doesn't feel loved? Good. You're loved by God. And maybe a spouse. And maybe grandchildren. And maybe all sorts of other people. But you're definitely loved by God. So you can't say you're out of the loop. You know how many times love is in the Bible? Over 900. You know what it is in the pecking order? 1 through 10? 3. There's only 2 other words that are in the Bible more than love. God and Lord. Makes sense? Doesn't it? Hello? God, Lord, love. I think it's fairly important. There's only 2 verses that you need to know in this love story we call Holy Scriptures. For God so loved the world, He sent His only Son. Without the Son, we got nothing else to talk about. If He didn't love you enough to send His Son, we wouldn't be forgiven, we wouldn't get perfection. That emotion, love, is where it starts and ends. And the second love quotation is 1 Corinthians 13 from Paul. You got hope, and she's wonderful. You have, what else do you have? Hope, faith, and love. But far and away the greatest of these is love. It's not even close. You better get some love going in 2016. All right, let's get to the scripture lessons. And emotion number 5. Fear. What does Isaiah say? What are you afraid of? Who here is afraid of snakes? Who's afraid of spiders? Who's afraid of that mosquito that's coming to get us? Oh my gosh. We sleep with netting around us now. I'm not going to get West Nile or whatever it is. Folks, there's lots of stuff we can be afraid of out there. And what does Isaiah tell us? Don't be afraid. God's with you. God will help you with your fears. How many of you are afraid of failing? How many of you are afraid of succeeding? You know, there's people out there, they don't want to succeed, because if they do, then people might expect them to keep doing good stuff, and we can't have that. So I'm going to set my expectations really low, and then I'll meet those, because they're way down here. No problem. Don't be afraid to fail. There is no fear in God's church family, because He's with you. He's got your right hand. He's got your hand. He's squeezing it. He'll help you through all those difficult times. Emotion number 6 from our song is one that I don't have any problem with at all. Much. It's called anger. Anybody been angry so far this year? Yep. 3 jobs ago, they sent me to anger management school. You don't believe that, do you, Sarah? Good. because they didn't. But isn't that what they do now? You know, if you get a little bit involved or a little bit enthusiastic, I'm sending you to anger management, boy. That's what they do. What does God say about anger? His anger. It only lasts for a moment. And in the morning, everything's good. I remember Grandma used to say, don't go to bed angry, you know, and you'll get up, you'll be fine. It's from this verse. We do have a lot of people out there that are angry. And some of us get angry. Is there any anger in the Bible? Ho, ho, ho! Let me pick a page. Let me find love in here. Oh, yeah, there's love. Trust me. You can find anger almost as easily. Jesus was angry at the disciples when they wouldn't let the kids come to him. Wasn't he? But my favorite anger story in Scriptures is between Nathan and David. King David, the one who did Goliath and was king for 40 years. Nathan was telling David a story about this mean, rotten guy that didn't share, and he just abused everybody he was around. And by the time Nathan had finished the story, Peter said, where is this guy? I'll tear him. I'm so angry I can spit. Who says that when they're angry? I'm so angry I can spit. I've never understood that one. I'm sorry. Anyway, David was so angry. And he said, Nathan, just show me where this guy is, and I'll tear him stem to stern. Nathan said, it's you, David. What-row? Rut-row. You know why it's my favorite story? Because of misplaced anger. A lot of us do it all the time. We misplace our anger. We're angry at the wrong people, or we're not angry at the right. You know, it's misplaced anger. Is it an emotion that we have to deal with and manage? Absolutely. If you don't get angry, you don't even care. Some people would say that. I had a coach tell me that. If you can't get mad at the way you played tonight, you don't even care. So there's a part of that emotion too. What are we up to? 6, 7? We're up to 7. Paul is talking to the congregation at Rome, and he gives us our 7th emotion. And it's one that I wish we didn't have to deal with, but we do. And guess what that emotion is? Suffering. Pain. Sadness. Is there any suffering and pain in here? You know, we can't choose the part of the Bible we want to live. I wish we just had Easter Sunday and could skip Good Friday. I love the resurrection story. But if we didn't have Good Friday, we couldn't have Easter Sunday. We participated in the suffering of Good Friday and the joy of Easter Sunday. It's in here. It's in here. I wish we didn't have to suffer and be in pain. But anybody that's been in pain and suffered knows that when they're not suffering and they're not in pain, it's really good, isn't it? I wonder if we would enjoy the lack of pain and suffering if we were all not suffering any pain. I don't know. It's an emotional question. But look at how Paul answers it to the folks in Rome who were suffering for a lot of different reasons. He says, suffering produces perseverance. You know what perseverance is? Endurance. Strength of character. Endurance produces character. And that produces hope. So when you go through pain and you get through it, you're a stronger person, a stronger child of God. I know that doesn't take the pain away or the suffering, but it's part of the deal. You know who I love, of course, in the Old Testament is Job. Is there anybody that suffered more pain than Job? No, arguably. And the quote that I love from Job is, Well, at least, God, when this relentless, that's the word he uses, Job says, when this relentless pain and suffering stops, I'll be dead. That's what he says. And I'll be in heaven and everything will be okay. He was looking forward to dying to get him out of the pain and suffering, but he wasn't cursing God. He wasn't forsaking God. He wasn't giving up on God. But that's pretty low, isn't it? That's pretty low. And of course, I've got to end on a high note. I can't end on pain and suffering, Dana. That's not me. I got to end on a happy note. And that's our gospel lesson. The 8th emotional moment is when Jesus is telling this parable. We all know this parable. He gives a guy a bag of gold. There is nobody in this church this morning that doesn't have at least one bag of gold. Bag of gold represents God's blessings, God's gifts, the power of the Holy Spirit that uniquely gifted each and every one of us. And he comes back and he says, I got 2 bags of gold. And what does God say? God's the master in the parable. He says, you're a good and faithful servant. And then what does he say? Does he just say, you're a good and faithful servant and give him a pat on the back and say, attaboy? Nope. He says, come on and share in my happiness. That's my favorite emotion. Happiness. Right after love. He says, come and share in it. Share in God's glory. The only guy that gets into trouble is the one that had the bag of gold and buried it in his backyard. And he came and he said, look what I did, Lord. I got your bag back. God doesn't give you gold to hide in the backyard. He gives you gold to share with other people. To use that gold to give them an idea of what God's glory and blessings are all about. And then, of course, the guy comes with 2 bags, and he says, I got 4 bags. And God says the same thing to that person. And notice, he says to both of them, you've done well with the little bit that I gave you to manage. Now I'm going to give you a whole bunch of stuff to manage. So the better child of God you are, the better use of God's gold you are, he gives you more and more and more blessings and responsibility. It's wonderful. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm emotionally drained. I am, and it's about that time. I'm emotionally drained because I've cried, I've laughed, I've been afraid to death. I'm suffering, I'm in pain. You just don't see it. But I'm so happy. You need to be happy too. Share that.